Hey guys, so what's up? I had this beautiful reminder today as I was going through scripture and looking over old notes, and I wanted to share it. It was for me, confident it was for me, it was for David, but I thought it might be for somebody else too. You know, culturally things are crazy, and politically things are always messed up. The spiritually, financially, things are just so like there's just this bad this unrest going on in the state of everywhere. So I just thought that maybe as much as this was a good thing that I needed today, I'd share it with you. And it starts in Matthew 14. It's important to note, I'll tie this in later. I think it's important to note that this is Matthew 14 verses 22 through 33, but it's important to say this is right after the feeding of the 5,000. This big miraculous event where Jesus feeds 5,000 people, right, with 2 fish and 5 loaves. And it's important because a whole crowd of people plus the disciples, a whole crowd of people sees they are a witness to this big miraculous event, this big miracle where the food just never ran out, and they all ate. But then it starts here in verse 22, and it says, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came towards them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified in their fear, and they cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once and said, "Don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the heavy waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him and exclaimed, "You really are the Son of God." So the disciples are in this boat, and a strong wind was blowing. Heavy waves are crashing into them. They're being tossed all about. It's early morning after this big miraculous event. They're probably kind of tired, maybe. I don't know. And they even think they saw a ghost. They're just terrified. It's pretty obvious they're terrified. And the first thing that Jesus says to them is, hey guys, don't be afraid. And the very next thing he follows up with that is, take courage, for I am here. The thing about this storm, the thing about this literal storm that connects with us is we all have storms. All have storms in our life, right? The thing about these storms that are in front of us, on top of us, around us, storms that we're in the midst of, that we see them from a distance coming at us. Maybe we're coming out of a storm. Storms all around us. We are often overwhelmed by storms. And sometimes, most of the times, a lot of the times, right, it's right after some big miraculous thing. The Lord's done something in our lives. We have experienced the goodness of God. And then just like verse 22, immediately after this, we're like, oh God, thank you, thank you, thank you. You love me, I love you. Great relationship. Immediately after this, bam, storm happens and there's a test. Bam, storm happens and something rocks your boat. And that's what happens. And you're like, oh, I'm terrified. It's got to be a ghost. We're going under. Something is overwhelming me. In the midst of all that storm, just like in that story, I just want to tell you today, from a blanket statement, if you get nothing out of the rest of this, the Lord is with you too, just like he was with them. And just like he's there, he's, take courage. He's there. Don't be afraid. He's with you. He's with you. Doesn't matter what the storm looks like. That is as a blanket statement, that's what I want to leave you with today. But I want to go on a little bit. So there was a literal storm going on, and it was pretty serious. They were overwhelmed. They were afraid. Jesus says to Peter, don't be afraid, take courage. And then Peter's like, so if it is you, okay, Lord, if it is you, so now he's like doubting and questioning. If it is you, ask me to come out to you. The interesting thing about this is in the middle of this storm, Jesus is like, cool, come on out. Everything around you should be distracting and overwhelming, but still, he desires your closeness. You need, in the middle of a storm, to seek out and come close to the Lord. And the Lord's like, yeah, come on out. This is right where you need to be. In the belly of this storm, in the middle of this storm, in the eye of the hurricane, right? You need to be right there, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with Jesus. That's where you're supposed to be. And Peter decides to say, if it's really you, Lord, tell me to come to you. I think it's interesting because, Jesus didn't calm the storm. He didn't instantly change everything around him. The wind still blew, the waves still crashed. It's not like the storm stopped. In the middle of the storm, Peter, even in his if it's you, Lord, he still had to walk in the storm towards Jesus. And so your storm, whatever it is today, is still going around. You might be in the boat going, Lord, stop this storm, stop this storm. And Jesus is in the water going, hey, don't be afraid. I'm right here. Don't be afraid. Come to me. Come to me. And you're in the boat going, Lord, stop this storm around me. It's scary. And he's going, get out of the boat and come to me. I think it's so important to realize that because a lot of times I picture the story and I just forget about the fact that the wind is still raging and the waves are still crashing, and none of that changed as Peter steps out of the boat. He didn't step out on calm waters. He stepped out in the middle of his storm. His circumstances never changed. His faith changed. The storm still continued all around him. But Peter, in the middle of his storm, had faith, and that faith was enough to provoke him to step out of the boat and onto the water. This faith was enough for Peter to look to Jesus and walk out, forgetting the storm, trying to look to Jesus and walk towards him. When Peter took his eyes off of the Lord, and only then did he begin to look at the circumstances around him to see the storm, and that's when he started to sink. That's when the fear took back over once again, when he took his eyes off of Jesus. It was also in that very moment, though, that Jesus reached out and grabbed onto him and took him back to the boat, and that's when the storm was immediately calmed, and Jesus could do what only Jesus could do and calmed the storm around him. And I think that is so important because this is the thing. I think it's right after this big miraculous event that's going on. You see the Lord do what only the Lord can do, and the goodness of God and the grace and the mercy and the love. And we have testimony after testimony of how the Lord has worked in our lives. And then immediately after this, a storm happens. And we're sitting in the boat praying for the Lord to stop this roaring thing around us, this situation that we don't like because it's uncomfortable. And we're asking for our circumstances to change. And the Lord is trying to build our faith. The Lord is trying to strengthen our relationship with Him. He's out there in the storm going, hey, you're fine, I'm here. Hey, you're fine, come to me. And we're like, stop all this madness. And He's like, no, I'm using this to get you to come to me. I'm using this to make it closer, the gap between me and you, to close that gap, because the storm is the only thing that's going to get you up out of the boat to come to me. The amazing thing is, if the water was calm, if everything that was going on in the middle of this, if they weren't terrified, would any logical, sane person think they're going to step out over the boat and walk on water? But it was because he was afraid, and he saw Jesus out there, and he's like, man, Lord, if that's you, ask me to come out there. Tell me to come out there to you. His faith in the Lord is what drove him to step out over himself, over the side of the boat, onto water. That's not something that you do in your own strength. That's what his faith in Jesus is what accomplished that. His faith is what provoked him to do that. And as soon as he looked around him and he fell, he went down, started to sink. The Lord's like, hey, I got you, man. I got you. Why did you doubt me? You know, you're safe. I'm still here. Don't be afraid. That's when the storm changed. I think that is so important because we're in the middle of, a lot of times we're in the middle of our boat praying. The Lord changes our circumstances. We don't like this. It's uncomfortable. It hurts. I don't want to go through this. And the Lord's outside going, yeah, it's a little windy. Yeah, the waves are crashing. Yeah, it might be raining. I mean, you know, there's stuff. I get it. You're scared. Come to me. I get, okay. Come to me. And the whole time we're like, stop this. I'll come to you after it's sun shining again. I'll come to you when the clouds go away. And the whole time the Lord's like, I'm using the storm to make you get out of the boat to walk to me. But this is the thing. So even if we walk out in faith, what I see here, if we walk out in faith and we trip, walk out in faith and we fall, if we head towards Jesus, if we're walking in that direction towards our Lord, he didn't let him sink and be like, hey, dummy, you took your eyes off me. No, immediately when he fell, he grabbed him and put him back to safety, and then he calmed the storm. Can you imagine what that did for his faith? It probably humbled him a little bit because he was like, man, I took my eyes off of Jesus, and man, that kind of sucked. But at the same time, could you imagine what that did for his faith? He was like, man, all I got to do is like focus on the Lord. All I got to do is, all this stuff didn't matter as long as I looked at him, looked to Jesus, fixed my eyes on Jesus. When we do things in our own strengths and in our own ways outside of his will, you know, we choose to just face these storms by ourselves. Like they could have been in the middle of this water with the storm and the wind and the waves paddling, you know, by hand or whatever, just, you know, scurrying about, hopeless, alone at sea, stuck in a storm. But when by faith we do it his way, looking to him, reaching out and holding his hand, he helps us. Even if we fall, he helps us. Without him, it's impossible. But with him, all things are possible. You know, one thing that I have learned, I don't want to say as I get older, because I'm really not that old yet, but the Lord uses things in our life, uses these storms to be faith builders, and not just to build our faith, but also to build the faith of those around us. It's, you know, it's hard to argue when you see somebody who's in the middle of a storm come out on the other end dry, come out on the other end afloat, come out on the other end unscathed. You know, there's no logical reason why, but, you know, they put their faith in Jesus, and on the other end, they're like, man, I don't know how that happened, but I held on to his hand, and I'm there, you know. It was really hard to argue with that when you see it played out in real time. You know, God can use these storms. In this story, he didn't stop the storm. He didn't move the storm. He used the storm. He didn't stop it. The storm had to be there in the first place in order for him to use it as an opportunity to let them know, I'm here and I'm going to save you. I'm going to protect you. Take courage. I'm right here. Step out. Focus on me. All these life lessons that, like, you can preach on. All these things that would make an awesome sermon by themselves in this one little account. It's all because of a storm. Things that we usually try to avoid. I just want to encourage you today. Like, this has been a weird, rough day for me. I don't know why. I feel like I'm going stir crazy, but I just want to encourage you that if you're feeling like you're stuck at sea, or if you're, you know, if the winds are hitting you and the waves are crashing down, or, you know, maybe you're stuck in the past, you know, maybe you feel like there's some dead stuff, you think you saw a ghost, I don't know. that as you step out of the boat and reach out towards the Lord, like he is saying to you, just like he said to Peter, don't be afraid. Take courage. You know, he's there. He's here. He's there. He's there for you. He's there for me. You know, and we need to go to him. It's as if we are moving closer to him by faith, obediently stepping out, climbing up to him, walking towards him in his will. You know, it doesn't matter the circumstances or the fear. It doesn't matter the storm. It is then that he helps us and empowers us to do the things that are impossible to do without him. You know, he's right there. You're not alone. I can keep saying that. But I've said it multiple times. I know everyone's going through something, and that's okay because we all need Jesus. And there is a reason for whatever it is you're going through, whether you look at it as a storm or a circumstance or karma or whatever term you want, reaping and sowing, whatever term you want to call it. Everyone is going through something. And I'm telling you right now, you're only going to get through this by looking towards Jesus, by having faith in Jesus. This situation is not an accident. It's by design. It's an opportunity for you to run towards him so that he can change you in a way that only he can. This opportunity, this circumstance, this thing is a way for him to use to change you, to build your faith, to get you to run to him, to build that relationship with him, to build your faith and the faith of all those around you that see that. So get an umbrella, batten the hatches. I don't know. Embrace the storms of your life. Call out to the Lord. They're a good thing. We're built to get a little bit wet sometimes. The Lord is with us. He loves you. I love you. I'm praying for you. You keep praying for me. You guys take care.